We're here today to talk about engagement and feedback in this EdTech Dialect session. Not that I am going to tell you all about everything you should know with engagement and feedback, but rather I'm going to give you some scenarios, some conditions, some areas in which engagement takes place. And most importantly for this session, because this is my expertise, is how the technology can support you. What's available for you, which you probably know a lot of these tools already and are familiar with them, but how they can support you in those areas and what are some uses for it. So I'm going to try not to talk too fast. I know that sometimes I get caught up and go micro machine man, but I'm going to try and keep it slow. And if you have questions at any point in time, you can use the live reactions. You can use the chat area. If somebody wants to keep an eye on the chat area for me, that's helpful because sometimes I don't do a good job of following up on it. But nevertheless, we can get going. I am going to have some opportunities for you to give me some feedback. I got 4 opportunities for you to give me feedback within the chat area, so you're definitely going to have that open anyways. So let's go. So the objectives today are to identify positive, high-impact engagement areas and conditions, to compare various engagement strategies. I'm going to list a few of those. To identify technology that can support these engagement areas, conditions, and strategies, to construct an engaging learning experience, and also to have an opportunity for all of us to share with each other. Now, I'm going to preface this once again by letting you know that I am not the expert. I'm not in the line of fire, as you might refer to it, day in and day out, trying to engage students. Okay, and I'm not trying to be an expert on the actual piece of engagement itself, but this is for the technology piece. So just keep that in mind. In addition to that, I'm not going to be able to cover every different way that you can use this technology piece, and I'll probably leave some out, but it's up to us and you and myself working together to try and fill in some of those gaps. So what might work really well in Sharon's area, math, might not work as well in Greta's area, English and language arts. Okay, so working to see what works best for what you're trying to do is what I'm all about here. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to pop in the Teams chat, and I just want you to list one thing you do that you consider to be a high impact engagement strategy. If you haven't done this thing, you can list what you have witnessed or what you have been a part of that you thought an instructor did a really nice job of. Okay, maybe you visited a classroom and you saw one of your peers doing something that really engaged the students. Share it. Okay, and so go ahead, like I said, in the Teams chat, just list one quick thing that you saw that you thought was high impact. And it doesn't have to be seen as a strategy. That's just a full word right there, I guess. And then, there's a little bit under that says, what technology do you currently use for this? There's some follow-up questions there. You can answer those if you want, but that kind of might get it into like paragraph form. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to the party.
Hello.
How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing.
You're here. It must be.
I'm here.
If you're here, if you can be here, that must mean that your day is going okay-ish, and hopefully we don't ruin it.
It's great. It's a good day. Thank you.
Good. Wednesday before the storm. All right. I see some answers coming in. I'm not going to spend time answering them right now. Hi, Tricia. So while you're finishing that up, okay, that area is kind of for you and for me to follow up on a little later to see where you're at. But I'm going to dive into engagement. I'm going to look at it at the macro level, we're going to look at the micro level, and then we're going to dive into areas and conditions of engagement. So the first things first is, what in the world is engagement? Well, the definition is to occupy, attract, or involve someone's interest or attention. Pretty basic, pretty broad. And to us in the classroom, that looks like visible learning, okay? As you are interacting with your students, whether they be in person or in the virtual space, their cameras on, you can actually see them nodding. You can see them taking part. That's that active listening, okay? They're giving you reaction via their nonverbals, raising their hand, things like that, okay? They're actively participating. That's how we view engagement, okay? It's working, all right? And also, are they able to identify learning goals as they're happening? Okay, so as they're doing something in their class, they can say, that's a connection to what my instructor said we were going to be learning in this class. Okay, and they can spell that out and they can show that for you as you go based on what you're doing in the class, the flow. And they can also progress through the goals. So you see them moving from one thing to the next in front of your very eyes. It's a beautiful thing. So the common belief is that engagement is synchronous. Okay, you see it happen. It's happening in front of you. It's happening as you go. All right, and then you leave it behind as you leave the class. Okay, that's engagement. We're going to break it down a little bit further, and we're going to look at it as a micro level. So instead of just focusing on the engagement that happens in front of you in the flow of the class, we're also going to think about what happens in the flow of the class and what happens leading up. So in order for students to be engaged, I think you all know that understanding technology is pretty important. Okay, if they can't join you on a Teams call or participate in a Teams call, it's pretty difficult for them to be engaged, right? And that's why one of the things that I wanted to do was reach out to you and continue to reach out to you and find out what these pain points are with technology for your students so we can work to alleviate some of them so they will be more engaged in your class. So things like understanding technology. Things that you can do is work to erase fears. So if you're going to be using Lockdown Browser, you could have a practice test. Okay, and we'll get more into this stuff here in a little bit. You can also run a test meeting in Teams. So leading up to the term, you've probably seen my email on that or my notice on that, hey, run a test meeting on a Sunday night or the Monday before your class starts to let students pop in, test their technology, make sure it is good to go. Because if that stuff's working, it's probably going to lead to them being a little bit more engaged. Okay. Another piece of that is content accessibility. If you have students with certain needs for accessibility, it's important that they can view your content, whether that be with a screen reader or maybe they're colorblind and they can't see it because they're using all sorts of fancy colors that you thought was a good idea and it probably looks really good, but it's not considered accessible. Is the content manageable? What we mean by that is, are they able to follow the flow of the class? Is it in module format in Canvas, for example? Do you have your navigation list slimmed down so they don't have a bunch of things that they have to sort through that they don't need? Stuff like that. Is your student comfortable? Are they nervous about coming to class? What have we done to alleviate some of those fears? Not maybe just technology, but maybe coming to class or participating in a college class for the first time. So when we think of engagement, obviously I'm sure you've thought about all this stuff before, but it's not just, are they raising their hand? Are they nodding? Okay. There's a lot of things that we can do to help with engagement within the flow of the class leading up to it. And so I have a little piece here about measuring engagement. I'm not going to spend time on that because I want to keep moving through this. And we're also going to come back to this in talking about measuring engagement. When we talk about measuring engagement, we often or automatically think like, holy smokes, measuring. It means we've got to be collecting. That means we got to be gathering and finding unique and special ways to bring this stuff in. But really, it's a pretty simple process, and we'll come back to that. So I mentioned that after we talk about what engagement is, I want to start diving into different parts of engagement. The first thing I want to dive into is areas of engagement and where we see engagement taking place. The first one is student and instructor engagement. When you're in front of the class, when you're out and about walking through the class and working with your groups in your class or however you're doing class, both in class and out of class, how are you and the students engaging? The second piece is those student to student. We know that it's very important for our students to engage with one another. So what are some strategies? What are some ideas? What are some conditions for our students engaging with each other? And then lastly, you probably knew this one was coming, but the student to content engagement and what that looks like as they interact with the content we have in place. So we're going to break these down a little bit further. We're going to go one by one. But the first thing I want to do is identify where students can engage. Okay. And the first thing is that student to instructor. So here's where the technology comes in. So there's interaction opportunities, and there's probably a lot more than what I have listed here, but these are just some ideas. So scheduled student check-ins. I've mentioned this before. I'm going to mention this again. I had an instructor come to me after the building community session last week for ETOM and say that I picked up a really good idea. And I'm glad that they did. And this is student check-in. So you all have office hours, but for the most part, they're open. Come in as you want. When you're dealing with virtual students and trying to get to know them and engage them, I don't think it's a terrible idea to require them to pop in once, maybe twice at the midway of the term, just to sit down, talk to them for 15 minutes. It's almost like takes the place of that pre-class when they're sitting in class and you're talking to them about the weather. Or you're talking to them about, did they watch the Super Bowl? Maddie Stafford got a Super Bowl ring. Okay? Little things like that just to touch base and build those relationships. Canvas discussions are a good one. Teams chat. I see the Teams chat is going off right now, and that's great because that means that you are connecting. But I know that this is a student and instructor piece, and I'm not doing a very good job on the Teams chat, but I will get back to the Teams chat when I have a chance. Okay? Channel messaging is one that gets overlooked, but if you ever visit a team that has a lot of channel messaging going on, meaning somebody posts something, whether it be yourself, in this case, since it's a student instructor, and then you get replies, that's kind of a different way, kind of a low stakes, laid back way to have a discussion in your class versus we are going to do a Canvas discussion now. So doing a channel messaging where maybe you post or maybe a student posts and start something, and then you get to interact in that space with the likes and the loves and the smiles and things like that a lot of people like to use. We obviously know that having your camera on is an important one. I'm not doing that to call any of you out right now, okay? It's totally cool that your cameras are off because I'm just doing a lot of talking right now. But when you're having that face-to-face and that engagement with your students, having the camera on is very helpful because you can see them and you can get that nonverbal feedback. Hi, Michelle. Another thing that's kind of cool, and I don't know if anybody is even using it anymore, but it's Together Mode in Teams. Together Mode will actually take all your students and place them with their cameras on like a seating chart or a seating order. Bookings is something that can be nice if you want to schedule appointments. So if you want to schedule those times for your students to come in, Bookings is a great way to do that. And obviously Whiteboard for interacting with your students as well. So as far as like measuring these engagement areas, Canvas has something called New Analytics. We went into that last EdTech Dialect session. I'm not going to dig into that now, but it's going to help you to understand, are your students doing the assignments? Are they attending class? Are they checking? Are they participating? Are they even viewing course content? And so you can see very kind of passive engagement from Canvas New Analytics. Teams Insights also has something. If you go to that sidebar in your Teams area there where you see calendar and chat and activity, if you click on the more, you can actually add an Insights app that will take a look at each one of your courses and show you how often students are attending, how engaged they are in terms of, are they attending the meeting, are they paying attention to the meeting, when did they join the meeting, when did they leave the meeting. And so that might be helpful for some of you if you're running a live online section, just to see your virtual learners and how they're participating. Teams live reactions. This is overlooked. But I love Teams live reactions when I'm in a meeting. Not that I need to feel good about what I say, because I'm cool with a thumbs down, but just that you're hearing me and I'm getting some feedback. Okay. So when I'm in a meeting and somebody says something good, I might give a little clap. Okay. And that lets that person know or presenting know I'm here. I'm liking what you're saying. Okay. And so encourage your students to use those live reactions. I know I'm not sharing my screen right now, but it's very easy to find up at the top here, and this is just going to repeat. But up here, you can get to these live reactions, and you can throw a little love out there or something like that. So if you haven't done that or you haven't encouraged your students to do that, that's a great way to further engage your students. And I see that right there. And so you can see the other ones on the board. On the screen there, you can read. Basic polling is a great way to measure as well. So now we move on to student, and some opportunities for students to engage. Obviously, is discussions, but I didn't want to go just basic with Canvas discussions. Did you know that you can do discussions within a studio video? So you could post a studio video, or take that a step further and have your students post a studio video. They can do it in a Canvas content page. They can do it right with a Canvas discussion. But students can actually reply in line on the video. So they can be watching a video and get to like the 52-second mark, stop it, and ask a question that will pop up on the screen right at that 52-second mark. students don't want to use Studio, they want to use their phones. Well, they can view the Studio videos. I don't know that they can leave inline comments from the mobile app, though. That would be something I have to follow up on. I just saw your pop-up chat there, Heather. But that's just another way to engage your students. Sometimes being more engaging is just changing it up a little bit and giving them something different or something new. And because think about it, as they go from class to class, they're probably using Canvas discussion here, Canvas discussion here. You just changed it up. A Flipgrid video post might be something. And if you're worried about not knowing how to use Flipgrid or if it's learning something new, Flipgrid's very easy to use. I'm happy to follow up with you on that. But it's just it's a video app that they can post quick replies to and replies to each other using a mobile device, using a webcam. So there's a lot of ways that they can get to it. I mentioned private channels and teams. I saw an instructor one time. I actually helped the instructor set it up, but they had a private channel for all their different group work. And each group had their own little channel that they worked in, consulted in, collaborated in. And the nice thing is they can collaborate and share files in that private channel. They can meet in that private channel like face to face. So if some are on campus and some are off campus, it's a great place for them to meet and discuss. But the biggest thing is being able to do private channel posts and reply to them. I'm doing this page, you do this page, I'm doing this part, you do that part, things like that. So lots of ways for students to interact. It also is a way for students to lead each other. And from my experience in the classroom, I know that one of the greatest experiences I can give students is to be student leaders. For example, I taught web design, and one of the most, I wouldn't say it fulfilling, but one of the most beneficial things was students that were excelling in web design would help students that weren't excelling or just had an issue and couldn't work through it and couldn't figure it out. Because that gave that other student, that leader student, that student that knew how to do it, perspective on how to teach it. Because, they say if you want to learn how to do something, teach it. And I think that speaking from experience, there's a lot of truth with that. Also, peer evaluation, peer editing. I know, Greta, you mentioned Eli Review, and that there's a lot that goes into peer editing with that, I believe, if I have that correct. So anytime that you can give your students the ability to peer edit is a good idea. So also having a presence, student bio in Canvas, having a profile picture in Teams. And I know that some students don't like to do that, and that's totally okay. But maybe it's not a profile picture of themselves, but something that they're interested in. That might strike an accord with another student, and they can strike up a relationship and get to know each other. And that will help with engagement in your class as well. Last thing is student and content. Making sure that the content is manageable. I mentioned making sure that you're using Canvas modules. I know that we do a great job across campus of organizing our content modules. But taking it a step further and using things like headers within your module to organize your content. Maybe you have like a first off session or an objectives area within your module. Then you have resources area within your module. Things to work to organize. And you can also use the indent feature. And then we get into unlocking content within the modules. This is not something that you have to do overnight. It's something that I wouldn't want you to try and do overnight because there's a lot of work to it. It's a build, and that's where blueprints come in. So there's a lot of different things here, and you're like, wow, that's super overwhelming. But like I said, we got to start somewhere and just build up. And some of you are right here, and some of you are right here, and some of you are right here. No matter where you're at, it's okay because you are working to build your content, organize your content, which will help to further engage your students. And the easiest thing that you could probably do is also make sure that navigation, your course navigation, is you weed out the stuff that you don't need. Okay, you're presenting all your content in the module area. There's no need to have assignments and quizzes and discussions and pages on your sidebar for your students to see because they're going to get all that stuff from the module area. Okay, so there's something to keep in mind to make that flow of the content more engaging for your students. And then you see some other things there. Mastery Pass, I mentioned that as a comfort item because you can use Mastery Pass to allow students to pick what they're going to do for a particular assignment. Maybe instead of taking a quiz, they write a paper or create a video. You get the idea. And I'm sure that you have a lot of these different elements in here, but I'm kind of going through all of it as like a piece for all of you. And then last but not least, being accessible, making sure that you run things like you do at scans. Each Canvas content area has, or rich content editor actually has an accessibility scanner. I think I showed that last session, but I can show you that again as well. So question number 2. What is something you do in your course or courses that you didn't view as engaging before? What is something you do in your course that you didn't view as engaging before? So all that stuff that we just covered, okay, whether it be like course accessibility, a practice quiz with lockdown browser, stuff like that, and you're like, yeah, it's just something I do. But you didn't really think about it like, hey, how can I engage my students better? Oh, here is a reason, and you would list that. Because I think a lot of you are doing a lot of those things. You just didn't recognize it as, that's going to help engage my students. So Elizabeth said peer review and module organization. And I'm going to tell you, y'all have done a great job with your module organization, and there's always further you can go. That doesn't mean that you need to go further, okay? But maybe you've been wondering how you can go further. Those are some opportunities to do that. All right. So the next thing, and I know that some of you are probably still thinking about how you're going to answer that question, and that's okay. So the next thing that I want to dive into is conditions for engagement. And this will make more sense here once I show you what we're talking about. We're going to break down these different conditions for how we are engaging our students. And I'm going to tell you before I show you that you shouldn't try and do all 3 really well, okay? You start maybe with one and get better at it and then go from there, like anything when you're building on things. So a couple questions to ask. Are my students motivated? Are my students participating? And are my students progressing? Okay, so these are 3 conditions for engagement right here. Being motivated, okay, participating, and then progressing. Now, they don't have to go in this order. I like them in that order because you roll into class, you're motivated, okay? So you see your Canvas course for the first time as a student, you're like, wow, that's really organized. Wow, I can see everything and what I'm going to have to do. I'm ready to roll. So you roll into class, and you sit in class, and you're participating. Okay, you're asking questions. You're doing the course content, participating in discussions, giving live reactions, and the list goes on and on. And then from doing those things, from being motivated, from participating in class, hopefully now you're seeing how you're progressing. And what can we do to help students see that progression? Goal setting, creating pathways, okay? Creating different ways for them as a learner, an individualized learner, to knock those goals down, okay? So my question for this session isn't to be the guru on those conditions, but rather how we can support those conditions through the use of technology and the technology that is available. So my question would be, how have you used technology to increase motivation in the past? How have you used technology to increase participation in the past? And how have you used technology to increase progression in the past? Now, this isn't me drilling you and putting you on the spot, but it's something to think about, all right? And I'm sure that each one of you in this session right now could list something for each one of those things when it comes to your technology use. You could probably think of something in the last week that you've done. So moving forward, how can you increase motivation thinking about all these things? How can you increase participation? And how can you increase progression? And you're like, Kevin, if we had the answer for these, we would have everything figured out as a teacher, as an instructor, as a faculty member, okay? But these are kind of like guiding questions. We'll leave them like that. I can't wait to read this chat after, or when I get a break here, because it's been going off and I love it. I love it. So the first condition we're going to look at is that motivation piece, okay? And first things first, the most important principle underlying differentiated instruction is the recognition that all of us that are in the classroom aren't simply content area specialists or evaluators of student work. That was the hardest thing that I learned, okay? In my time in high school and college, I always thought that, I had to be that person that stood up front as the epicenter of knowledge that gave the knowledge out to the room, right? Well, a lot of that knowledge is out there. Okay, they can find that stuff, but how do they properly construct those things? Okay, and so what we're trying to be are designers of these educational experiences, to guide them through, to ask the questions, not to answer the questions all the time, but to guide them through those questions and those experiences. You know all that stuff. So some strategies that we can do to make that happen that are tied in with motivation are things like the jigsaw method. Okay, think, pair, share is very similar to this, in that each student in a group work here becomes a content area expert. Okay, and they work and to know that area, and then they share that with each other. Okay, and then we join it as a big group, and we go over that, things like that. The flipped classroom, you may have heard of that, but that takes me out of the front of the room. Okay, provides students with videos, studio videos, where they can interact with each other and collaborate with each other, or maybe resources where they can peer review and things like that. And then when we get into class, we have that group work and things like that. So we're switching how we're doing things. Doing more cooperative, type learning versus just competitive or individualistic work. I got to stop putting big words in there when I'm trying to talk so fast. And so why I'm here, how can technology support motivation? Okay, I mentioned private channels. Private channels are great because it's obviously group work. Okay, and they're in a smaller area where they might be more likely to share. Okay, and participate and get to know each other and have discussions. Okay, you do a Canvas discussion, it's great, but it's like the whole class right there, unless you don't assign it to the whole class. All right, you have private channels where they can collaborate. That's their own little safe space. Not that they need a safe space, but you get what I'm saying. All right, breakout rooms. I saw Elizabeth mention breakout rooms. If you're not using breakout rooms, I know that there's sometimes some setup involved and they can be a little bit frustrating, but it's a great spot to have a side conversation within the flow of the class. Okay, and I don't know about you, but when I get put in a breakout room, I sometimes roll my eyes because, I'm going to have to participate. But you know what? I always leave a breakout room with ideas and perspectives. Always. Okay. It's not my favorite thing to do, but it's effective. All right. And you as an instructor can roll through those different virtual spaces. Now, if you're doing breakout rooms in your class and you have students in class and students live online, this is the Kristen and Bill suggestion right here. Have your students make sure your students bring in headphones. Okay. Students in the class. Because then they can still meet with the virtual learners. And you're like, well, Kevin, why don't you just have all the virtual learners meet together and all the in-class students meet together? You can do that too. But if you have a situation where sometimes a student's going to be in a class and the next week they're out of class and you have your groups established, they're still going to have to meet together somehow. And having headphones and a device makes that a whole lot easier because then they don't have to have another speaker and a whole lot of noise. You know what I mean? So some of our instructors use Padlet. That's pretty cool. It's like this shared space. You can embed it in Canvas. And you can post a prompt. It's almost like a bulletin board where you can walk up to it, post a sticky note, and people can respond to your sticky note. You can respond with video. You can respond with links, resources, things like that. But it's a great way for students to get their work out there and work with each other. Obviously, I mentioned peer leadership or peer mentoring. Canvas has a group area. If any of you have used that, it's a great way to set up groups within Canvas if you don't want to use Teams. But you can see I have Teams mentioned there as well. So when it comes to motivation, obviously cleaning up your course, making sure your course looks inviting, introducing yourself, creating those connections, but also providing opportunities for students to work with each other and build those relationships with one another and collaborate. The next one's participation. So questioning, problem solving, reciprocal teaching, giving students the opportunity to not just sit back and get it, but also share it and become subject area experts in the different areas. Okay, so classroom discussion helps with this. That's strategy. I mentioned the reciprocal teaching, problem solving, questioning. You see that list goes on and on. So how can the technology support it? I'm a huge fan of Teams chat, and every meeting, every training, everything that I'm in, there's always a great Teams chat going on. There is a name for that. It's called back channeling. And I think that your students are very comfortable, for the most part, back channeling. I would think that you're probably nodding your head because you're not giving me live reactions to help me with this. But that back channeling happens in probably all of your classes at some point, and there's lots of good questioning that takes place. So that knocks out a couple or really supports the questioning piece there. I mentioned the live reactions. If I have not made live reactions concrete in your brain by this point that it's very helpful to yourself as a presenter, but also students when they're presenting, to give a little clap, give a thumbs up, give a smile, things like that. That's that feedback that you need in that live online environment, okay? There's also the hand raising feature. So if all of you were to raise your hands right now, as the organizer of this, and I think all the participants, you can see who put their hand up first, which is kind of helpful because when questions come up, we want to make sure that we get to the person that asked the question first so they don't have to have their hand up the longest. I think it goes back to the pain that you suffered in elementary school from your teacher making you hold your hand up and just keep holding your hand up. I remember I probably had the best shoulder muscles I ever had in my life back in like the second grade when I had to raise my hand for everything and hold my hand up, and then just pretty soon you're supporting your hand. And then pretty soon, if you didn't have that desk there to support your hand, and then you switch. And you start all over again, okay? The art of the hand raise. Kids these days don't understand the pains that we have gone through. So moving on, there's an app in Teams meetings now, and I want to show you it real quick. Let me bring it up. But there's a Q&A app. So I know a lot of you use the Teams chat, but if you want to be more orderly with your Q&As or your questions that come in, you can actually add a question and answer app to your Teams meeting. So let me see if I can add it right here on the fly. So from this meeting area here, if I click on the plus, I can go and add a tab, okay? And one of them is the Q&A tab right here. Now, if you don't see it, that's cool. You can search for it, Q&A. Pretty easy to remember. And I should be able to add this right now to the meeting. There we go. And what this will do, come on. Couple settings here. We're just going to leave it as is. But it's going to allow you to submit questions to me to ask during the meeting. And students in your class can respond directly to those questions as well. So back channeling is more of a conversation, kind of like what you're having here. But this is more for like straight up questions that come in within the flow. Like, I understand this, but can you help me to understand this? And it might be something that has to go more in depth. So if you look in the Teams meeting now, bring this over here, you're going to notice that there's a new icon that has shown up for you. It's called the Q&A icon. And you all can ask questions right here. And as a question rolls in, I can moderate that question and choose as the instructor if I want to publish that question. Okay? And once I publish it, other students in the class can answer it, or I can answer it. And I think you can like it as well. So kind of a cool feature within Teams. I'm sure all of you experts will find, oh, Heather just asked one, so I'm going to like it. And I don't know, I think I have to approve it. I can delete it, actually. Maybe I don't think I clicked the box to approve it or not, but you can see Heather's question rolled in. I can answer right here. I think you can answer it. Correct me if I'm wrong. If it's inappropriate, I can get rid of it. We know Heather. Sometimes she's inappropriate. Just kidding, Heather. We can also pin it to the top if it's a really good question or a really good point. So there you go. Thanks for submitting a question. Sorry I didn't answer it. Testing. What strategies do you recommend when you only have 1 to 2 LOL students each class and they are different every single time? I'm gonna let some of you answer that one right now, so I can just keep cruising on. But Heather, I'll get back to it if somebody doesn't give you a good answer. Not saying I'll give you a good answer, but I'm gonna give you an answer when I get back. Okay, so that's participation. The last one is progressing students. The main thing with progression for engagement is setting goals. Now, all of you probably have your students set some sort of goals, but do you follow up on those goals? An excellent way to follow up on those goals is to have that required office hour meeting, okay, where you actually sit down with your student and you look at your course goals and you say, where are we at with these? And here's the goals that you set for this course, okay? So that's some ways that you can use technology. Obviously, some strategies are the basic ones like taking a quiz. And there's a lot of other strategies as well. My favorite is simple feedback, okay? And I think having a form like a Microsoft poll or form, that you can send out to your students to get an idea for feedback in terms of where they are in terms of their goals and where they want to be. All right. And there's a lot of other ways to get that feedback as well. That's just one. So how does the technology support it? Canvas Mastery Paths will help your students work through their goals. Okay, so you've seen this before, but you can actually have a prescriptive assignment or a prescriptive quiz, and they score from, maybe it's out of 10 and they score from 10 to 7. Maybe they don't have to do anything else. Okay, if they score from 6 to 4, well, you got to go, here's a reading that might help. Okay, now these are very basic, bland examples. All right, and then maybe if they really do poorly, here's an assignment that they can do. Here's some more resource they can cover. But that's going to help them kind of circle back. Hey, you didn't really do very good on this goal. Here's some more resources for you to kind of dig into it, some helpful resources. Maybe you already provided those resources, and that's great. Probably should have. But that will also allow them to kind of pinpoint what they might have missed and that they could really zone in on to do better. So things like Nearpod can help with goal setting, and Canvas rubrics. Obviously, you can actually put your course goals, your, as they call them, outcomes, right within a rubric. You can make it for points or not for points because they have non-scoring rubrics. The Canvas Mastery Gradebook will then reflect those outcomes, and there's a whole list right there. Canvas Studio, I mentioned that. I know that there was something else that I wanted to. Oh, the Canvas, using Canvas discussions, not necessarily just for the actual course content, but to share learning goals within the class. Okay, you could also do that within teams, but using a Canvas discussion to talk about, you know, what you did, what you think you're doing well, and sharing, okay, and what some pain points might be for other students is not a bad idea, and kind of a change of pace for a discussion in your class. It also gives students a chance to give you feedback on how they're feeling about things. It's kind of a different way of doing it. And obviously having SILs and tutors and stuff like that, encouraging opportunities for those. So number 3, which engagement condition are you most likely to focus on? And if you didn't write that down, that's okay. But the different conditions are engagement, motivation. Here you go, right here. I'll just put them on the overhead. I keep calling it overhead. Motivation, participation, and progression. Which of the 3 are you most likely to focus on? Now, the order that I place them in are not like the official order of these 3 conditions. Okay, there isn't really an official order of these conditions. It just made the most sense for me. Motivation might happen through participation. Okay. Motivation might happen once they see that they start progressing. So if you can get them progressing, they might say, oh, I've caught the motivation. Okay. And you get the idea. So which engagement condition are you most likely to focus on? And you can focus on all 3. I'm a fan of putting my attention on one thing, trying to do it well, and then moving on. I'm not saying you won't do it well. Just talking about my brain. All right. So another engagement factor is accessibility and making sure your course content is accessible. I touched on it a little bit already, and I just want to circle back to it and identify some ways for you to make sure that you're being accessible in your course. So try to avoid tables. Make sure that you're aware of color, obviously with color blindness and things like that, as I am using green for my presentation. UDoIt scanner. If you have never scanned one of your courses using UDoIt, I recommend that you do it. Good one. Just because it's a free service, it's easy to use, and it's going to let you know kind of where you're missing some things. Now, when you get a whole list of things that it says is wrong with your course, don't think that you have to change it in a day, but it's something that you need to work towards. Obviously, the rich content editor has accessibility checkers. If you haven't seen those yet, let me just show you real quick. So here I have a content page here, and right here you can run an accessibility checker on this specific page. Since I'm here editing this page, I also want to show you that you have the ability to allow your students to edit your content pages as well. So you can set it to only teachers, but you can allow anybody to contribute to your Canvas page. So maybe I have this little section here where I want my students to identify what the mobile app in Canvas is, Outlook, and ways that they found it useful for their course. I could turn the students loose and they could build this resource right here within the course. So pretty cool way to engage your students in the course resources as well. So that's the accessibility checker. Studio has closed captioning, so make sure that you're making use of that. Teams has live transcripts and live transcription. It's supposed to. Thank you to those of you that responded to me. For some reason, live transcription is not showing up in Teams meetings right now. Where did my Teams meeting go? I can't get it to show up. But the live transcription is in your meeting settings. If you click the menu dots, you should see it right under the record. It should show you like the whole transcript from a meeting, who said what, but it's not working right now, and it's probably just something that is a setting issue, but we'll work to get that fixed. Auto transcribe is cool, but just know this: if you turn on your auto transcript in your meeting, only you can see it. Okay, you're not, as the instructor, turning it on for the whole class. It's just for you to see, and you can also adjust the language on that if you wanted to have it in a different language like Spanish or something like that. PowerPoint also has live transcripts. I don't have that turned on right now, but it will actually transcribe what I'm saying as it's being said, so that's pretty neat. And so here's just some feedback on using technology for engagement and feedback. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we've covered a lot of stuff already in a short time. But using technology to present ideas, learners can then begin to make connections between and among ideas. Okay, so something as simple as a Canvas discussion or peer editing to give peer feedback and things like that can kind of really help ideas to evolve by sharing. When technology is used to learn, students can then use it for thinking and creating expressions of what they learn. We're not talking about just writing papers. We might be talking about presentations, videos, imagery, all sorts of things like that. Ways that we can engage our students by doing different things and actually doing, okay? So even if it's like a lab, they might film it. I've seen great examples over the last couple weeks of instructors in virtual settings filming things and sharing those things, not just with the instructor, but with their peers as well, so they can see what unique and creative ways that they have done. And I've seen Sarah and I've seen Heather both have great examples of that they posted virtually for all of us to see on Facebook. So that was pretty cool to see. So you better bet that is engaging students because they want others to see what they're doing and they're proud of their work from that, which is awesome. So other examples here as well for using technology for engagement and feedback. But I like the students can help each other get to where they want to go. Okay, we're kind of breaking out of those silos and being in, our own space and sharing like crazy. And so adding it all up, measuring engagement. And I think the best way that you can measure your engagement is quite simply just feedback, whether that be in person, whether that be you creating a poll or a form, not just waiting until the end using evaluation kit to get that feedback on how you did as an instructor. Brianne does a great job of using Nearpod for that in her class and getting feedback in the moment when students, they answer a question and don't get the question right, okay? Right then and there, Brianne knows either I need to circle back on those things as a whole, if a lot of people don't get it right, or I need to focus in on that one student and how I'm approaching instruction with that student. So that's great feedback right there. And if they don't answer it, they're probably not paying attention, and we really got to work on some engagement there. And so there's ways that student feedback can come directly from students with weekly reflections, Canvas discussions, channel posts. You might get to the end of the week and just have students reflect on the week and what they learned and what they like to learn and what was interesting to them. Simple stuff like that can happen in teams. It's kind of a very informal feedback piece. And I mentioned Nearpod. Everyone loves Kahoot, but you can actually use Kahoot for feedback in class. And they'll giggle and laugh along the way and be competitive. And obviously boring old forms polling feedback. But there's also ways that you can get feedback passively, meaning you're not directly asking your students for that feedback with Canvas Analytics. You go to your Canvas course homepage, you're going to see new analytics over to the right. Click on that, and there's a whole bunch of information that you're going to find out about your students. And if you have never visited that, I encourage you to visit that when you have a spare time. And you're like, Kevin, I don't have spare time, okay? So at some point, sometime, somewhere, you might get a spare moment. Check it out. Canvas Mastery Pass is a cool way to do it because you're going to see, what additional assignments students are doing and whether or not that's helped students to kind of up their skills a little bit and their knowledge base a little bit. And at some point, we're going to really dive into Canvas Mastery Pass, but it takes more work. It's a build, okay? And you all have a lot to do as it is, and I get that. So it doesn't mean I'm going to stop talking about Canvas Mastery Pass. Bet that. And so the last question, we're in the fourth quarter. We're almost done. Thank you for still being here. I see a lot of you are still here. What are some ways you gather feedback using technology? Okay. Maybe you also answer this with how you might in the future use technology to gather feedback. But for now, if you just answer what ways you're currently using technology to gather feedback, I think that'd be pretty cool. And I sent out that email reminding you of this session, saying threatening that I was going to steal some ideas, and I'm going to. So if you put your ideas in here, I'm going to work to steal them. But I promise you, I will do my best to give credit where credit is. I will cite my sources. Now, I don't know about MLA format or anything fancy like that, Greta, but I will work to cite my sources. I was never very good at using proper format when citing my sources. So, fourth quarter, what are some ways you gather feedback using technology? Pretty basic question. And I got to tell you too, this session was a doozy to prepare for because in some ways I was kind of out of my comfort zone a little bit because it wasn't like 100% technology that I was going to be talking about. I was going to have to really tie things together, which is my job. But I'm not in the classroom every day like you are, so I don't actively engage students all the time. So I appreciate all of you that took time out of your lunch hour today to tune into this. One of these days I'll actually provide food and maybe I can bribe people into coming and hanging out with me in person. I don't spit too much when I talk, so you should be safe. And that's it. I have some guiding questions here, but I'm going to cut you loose because you probably have class to get to, right? So thank you for attending. I appreciate it. Oh, don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. I have one more thing I want to put up here. There we go. So what's next? Check this out. We have some more sessions coming up, including a pop-up session March 2nd at noon. I'm going to do that live from Greenville, but it's also going to be virtual. And I'm going to talk to you about all the cool features in Microsoft Edge. You're going to be blown away by what you can do in Microsoft Edge because I know that taking Chrome away from the Teacher Station desktops wasn't everyone's favorite thing, but understand that Microsoft Edge is built on Chrome. It's essentially Chrome with some additional cool features. So I got a pop-up session, boom, and it is going to be on March 2. So mark your calendars. You want to attend it. And there's 3 more of these official EdTech sessions coming up. One of them is going to talk collaboration in teams. Another one's going to talk about building student relationships. And the last one, your favorite one, is going to be diving into new quizzes because the old quizzes tool is going away, right? So you're going to want to make sure that you know how to use the new Canvas quiz tool. So that's it. That's all. Thanks for attending. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Enjoy the rain, and we'll see you later.